Welcome to Canfield and Company. On today's show, we welcome former Troutdale City Councilor John Wilson.
Hi, welcome to Canfield and Company. I'm your host, Rob Canfield. I have a special guest in the studio today, Troutdale resident John Wilson. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Rob.
John's a longtime Troutdale resident. He's been involved with community events for several years. We're talking Boy Scouts, Summerfest with the Kiwanis, and also now he's currently working on one of our favorite events here on Canfield and Company is the Troutdale Cruising. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about the City of Troutdale's recently passed budget by the Budget Committee. We haven't talked about local issues for a while, so I thought there were some interesting things that the Budget Committee did, so I thought we'd talk about them. And just a disclaimer, I am on the Budget Committee currently, and John is a former city councilor with Troutdale, and he has also been on the Budget Committee for several years. So John, some things business as usual, other things different. One of the things you and I are both a little concerned about, and a lot of people don't know about this, is the City of Troutdale has been subsidizing stormwater fees for large businesses, well, for all businesses, but especially large businesses for as long as we can remember, haven't they? We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And both John and I have been wondering for years, these are $1 billion corporations, exactly in the case of FedEx. Why are we subsidizing stormwater fees for these companies for that amount of money? Now, you've been concerned about it for a long time, John. What has been your main concern about these subsidies?
Well, there's a imbalance because the money has to come from somewhere. Not until the last 3 years have they started tracking, separating stormwater runoff from the stormwater.
Right.
Or sewer. And so the last 3 years, we've spent over $710,000 subsidizing big corporations because we've had a cap on stormwater runoff of $25.
Right. Now what this means to you, Mr. or Mrs. Troutdale citizen, is that this is money that comes from Troutdale General Fund, and we are basically paying the sewer bill, the stormwater sewer bill, for the big businesses to the tune of how much?
Well, the last 3 years, going into fiscal 2017, will be $710,000.
Over the last 3 years. That's a lot of money for a city that commonly deficit spends every year.
Correct. Now, 2 years ago, we raised the cap to $50. And mind you, we're the only city in the state of Oregon that has a cap on their stormwater runoff. So we raised it to $50. So FedEx and all the other big companies, the maximum amount of stormwater runoff they pay is $50. Maximum amount a household pays is around $8, okay, per month. So last year we doubled the amount of the cap again to $100. Now at the budget meeting we were out of balance. We were deficit spending again. I suggested that we remove the stormwater runoff cap and just let the big corporations pay so we could balance the budget. We would not deficit spend last year. So the Budget Committee wasn't willing to step up and do that. And so I went back to the City Council meeting, again tried to get the cap removed to make everything equitable for the citizens and the big businesses. But Councilor Ripma voted to table it. Councilor Allen seconded it. And then Councilors White, Allen, Brooks, and Dave Ripma voted to table it till February of this year.
So keep in mind, Troutdale residents, these are the city councilors who voted to basically pay for these companies' stormwater fees. A lot of you didn't know this, so I hope you know now.
So if I can go just a little bit further. And every year that I've been on council, the council has agreed to increase the amount of utility fees for water, stormwater runoff, and sewage to the consumer.
That's you, folks.
Right, to us. And even this year, they voted to increase or take off half of the stormwater subsidy. So this year it's $165,000 that comes out of the general fund that could have been used for parks and other things so we wouldn't deficit spend again.
Right.
And all these big companies, for the most part, are saying they want to be good neighbors and they're willing to pay their fair share.
Now, last year, when you were on the city council last year, I believe the city council gave direction to the public works director to ask some of these businesses what they thought about removing the stormwater cap. What response did he get?
The response that he got was they want to be good neighbors.
So they have no problem
and they want to
paying
pay
it,
their
did they?
fair share, because everywhere else that they have these same size facilities, they're paying not a capped stormwater runoff.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense. You have businesses, especially, for instance, a business like FedEx. We're a small line item in a budget. They wouldn't even notice it. And they said they don't have a problem with it. They want to be good neighbors about it. And yet there are city councilors, God bless them, who think that we may offend them if we raise the stormwater rates. Do you see any logic in that line of reasoning that they gave?
You know, well, Glenn White has probably given them the most.
Right.
He said that it attracts new business. I've sent him 2 emails asking him what new businesses it attracted. Tanny Staffison, who's the budget committee chair, said there were people out there that were against it and they would move out of the city. I asked him who those people were. He refused to give it to me. Steve Gashler also asked him who those people were, and he couldn't come up. So what they're saying is not believable.
Yeah.
So the other thing that Glenn wanted to do was that he said there hasn't been enough outreach. Since I was on city council for 4 years, all we've done is discuss stormwater runoff and utility rates and how we're not preparing for retirement of these systems. And you know, when I started diving into this more, you know, a nearby city, Gladstone, has refused to even charge their customers the rate that they're being charged for water. They have issues with their stormwater runoff and their sewer, and they're in debt now to fix their infrastructure, $50 million. So somewhere that's going to have to be paid for. You either pay for it now, or you pay for it a little bit now and a little bit every year, or you pay a whole lot later. And I would rather pay a little bit more now and get it out of the way, just like we put money away for our retirement.
Absolutely.
And we ought to just pull the Band-Aid off and let it go. Even today, Glenn White at the budget meeting tried to get this reversed so that either we continue to subsidize at 100% or subsidize at 25% and then take another increase. But the other 6 councilors have seen that we just need to start pulling the Band-Aid off.
The other 6 councilors saw the light of day, and thank goodness so did the budget committee. And we'll be right back after this. We'll talk more about Troutdale's budget process. We'll be right back.
Coming up next, Troutdale just raised residential water rates. So why does Troutdale subsidize business water bills?
Hi, welcome back to Canfield Company. I'm Rob Canfield, your host. And today my special guest is Troutdale resident John Wilson. He is a former city councilor, and he is also a former Troutdale Budget Committee member. And again, disclosure, I am currently on the Troutdale Budget Committee. We have been talking about the recent procedure for passing the current Troutdale city budget. We've been talking about subsidies for stormwater fees for big corporations. Well, John, we have the budget here, and it says right here you've got the total subsidy right here, $165,000 is what we're subsidizing big corporations for their stormwater fee for this go around. Does the city of Troutdale give subsidies to residents at all?
No, they do not. In fact, if you don't pay your utility bill, you'll get your water
You'll get
shut off until you get it caught up. And I guess, this year the city council is elected to significantly increase our utility fees based on need.
They have done that, yes.
But you still have one councilor that's fighting to save the subsidy for big businesses. So the citizens of Troutdale, end up having to pay more while they pay less.
So we're paying more for our stormwater sewer rates and water rates, so they can pay a subsidy to these businesses, basically. So what would you think if you're a senior citizen on a fixed income, or a single mom who is doing all they can do to keep their kids in clothes and school supplies? What would you say to them about subsidizing big businesses while we're increasing the rates of the residential?
I can say that I fought for taking that away. Past city council could not say that, and Glenn White can't say that because he is supporting the significant increases in our utility bills while asking us to continue to subsidize big businesses and their stormwater runoff. And Glenn, if you want to subsidize big businesses, you need to subsidize the citizens too. Let's take more money out of the general fund that could be going to parks, that could be going to more services for the consumer, and take that away and subsidize the utility bill. I would like to meet with you, Glenn, here and have a face-off and discuss this very subject as well as two others that we're talking about tonight.
The ball's in your court, Glenn White and other city councilors. Shoot me an email. We'll get you on the show with John Wilson, and we can talk it out right here. So every Troutdale citizen, every folks in East County can see what we're talking about. These numbers are amazing. $165,000 we're subsidizing this year.
And remember, that's half of what it would be.
Yeah.
Because this council agreed to only subsidize half of it this year.
Because last year we subsidized $343,000 straight out of the general fund. That was our mascot, by the way, the monster. The monster is even ticked off. Our mascot, the monster, is ticked off about this giant subsidy. Last year it was $343,000. That's money we could have spent to maintain our parks, to fix our roads, to do all sorts of things that we just basically threw it away.
Hire proper staff for the city to give us the best services.
Exactly. But instead we just threw away $343,000. It's a shame. So some other things, I'm going to switch channels a little bit, switch gears a little bit. Some other things happened at the Budget Committee meeting. Part of the budget proposal was $50,000 to replace the old carpet and linoleum at the Public Works building. $50,000. This would have been, as I said, to repair and replace linoleum and carpet. However, Councilor Glenn White, I guess he's in our scope today, he said that he went and looked at the building and he said, oh, it's fine, the carpet's fine, the linoleum fine, we don't need to replace it at all. Even though he's a policymaker, he doesn't run the Public Works Department, he's made the decision it's okay. And then he said, he asked Mr. Gashler, he said, Mr. Gashler, the Public Works Director, didn't even know that this $50,000 was in the budget. Well, I'm sitting on the Budget Committee, I'm thinking, well, that's pretty odd. Because department directors submit the budgets for their departments to the Finance Director. So I asked the Finance Director, Eric Mueller, Mr. Mueller, how did this $50,000 budget item get into the budget? And I knew the answer. He said, well, the Public Works Director submitted his department's budget to the city. That's how it got in. So basically, there's no way around this. Viewers, you can decide for yourself. Councilor White said he talked to the Public Works Director and claimed that the Public Works Director said he had no idea how this $50,000 to replace the linoleum got in the budget. But as the Finance Director pointed out, of course he knew, because it's the director that submits the budget for Public Works to the Finance Director. So I'm not going to say that Glenn White misspoke. I could be impolite and say another word, but I won't. I'll let the viewers decide. Basically what Councilor White said was not true. Of course, Mr. Gashler, the Public Works Director, knew it was in the budget because he's the one that proposed it. Now here's another odd thing. Let's move on to another one of our...
Can I comment on this?
Sure.
Even before I was on the Budget Committee, cities are great at building new buildings.
They are.
But they're terrible at maintaining them. Case point, they had to move out of the old City Hall because they kept deferring work that needed to be done. The CCB building, the community building, they're not putting any money in, but it needs to be fixed. I mean, if these were private buildings, they would make that person business put the money into it to make them safe again.
And they would be required to. That CCB building is not even ADA compliant.
Which they used to complain about until they bought it.
Correct.
So when I got on City Council, I had the city put together a list of all the buildings and their conditions.
And this is the first time this has been done in several years.
Right. And the entire City Council, including Glenn, was in support of it because we wanted to maintain our buildings.
Right.
In fact, the Parks Advisory Committee got the city to start putting money into the Sam Cox building because it was in such disrepair.
Right.
It was at a point where it could have just started going downhill beyond being able to be reasonably repaired. So all the money now from the rent of all the city parks buildings goes in for to pay off the cost of the Sam Cox building.
Right.
But now we have the city wanting to put money into a building to maintain it, to keep it presentable and safe for people coming into it. And now we have the city council saying, no, we don't want that. And Glenn has said that he's looking at saving the citizens money. Well, I think this is the third year that this has been deferred. And every year that you wait, you have labor costs that go up and you have material costs to go up. So Glenn, I would ask you, how are you saving the citizens money as the building deteriorates more, and what qualifies you to make those decisions?
That's right, because he's a policymaker. He does not run the department. Now, a funny thing about priorities with the city. The Budget Committee, in its wisdom, voted to remove $50,000 to pay for the replacement of the linoleum and the carpet. On the other hand,
we don't have the money. Then we don't have the money to take care of that.
No, but on the other hand, there was a budget item request for $75,000 for a dog park. So we can't afford $50,000 to maintain our buildings, but for some reason they think we can afford $75,000 for a dog park. And we're going to talk about the dog park issue right after this. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Canfield Company. I am Rob Canfield, your host. My guest today is John Wilson. He's a longtime Troutdale resident, former Troutdale City Councilor, and former Budget Committee member. So we were talking about Troutdale budget and replacing carpet and linoleum at a public works building in Troutdale which the city says they can't afford, but they think they can afford a dog park for the tune of $75,000. Now, they had a test run, right, last year of a couple of parks, leash-free dog parks, to see unleashed dog parks to see what would work, and it turned into a kind of a gigantic failure, didn't it?
I'm now not so much in favor of it for two reasons. One, we don't know who's going to be responsible for cleaning that up every day. I guess everybody that votes it back in should sign a petition that they will be there, just like the people on this, that take care of a mile of the road.
Right.
So if we don't have the money to fix a public building, then we don't have the money to buy property and pay for a new off-lead dog park.
Right. Said they had a test in a couple of parks in Troutdale, and I guess I wasn't surprised that so many pet owners did not pick up after their waste.
They also did open houses for the people that in the park that it was supposed to be.
Right.
And those people said, not in my backyard.
Absolutely.
And so at one point, the people were in support of it, but obviously the homes have changed hands, and now the people that are there don't want it. So that's, I think, why the Parks Department Advisory Committee has decided to look for a piece of property. I think they were looking at the property behind Safeway that Reynolds School District owns. And who knows if the school district wants to sell it, how much do they want for it? I think this should just be tabled, or whoever is voting it in needs to say, okay, this is how much we're willing to put towards it, but if we don't have the money, again, if we don't have the money to maintain our buildings, and part of the reason we don't have the money to maintain our buildings is because we're subsidizing
stormwater
runoff fees that we could use to take care of those things. We don't have the money for the other, and until they come up with a plan of where it's going to be, what the costs are going to be, and who's going to maintain the cleanliness of the park, and really what are the true costs. Because I remember one time the city of Portland was making a new off-lead dog park. We had in our capital improvements budget $70,000 for this, but they were able to buy. They were going to build an off-lead dog park for $30,000. So big difference. I mean, ours is like double, and what are we going to get that is needed?
Yeah. And after considering this for quite some time, I've had a year to consider this, which is why I voted to remove the funding for the dog park this year. I had my dog, George W. He passed away. He's the George W. Dog Productions. That's the dog. I took him to every single dog park around here, 2,000 Acres, Lewis and Clark Park, all the other parks, and they weren't supposed to, I probably did, Sunrise Park, and some of the dog parks in Portland. And the common denominator in all of these parks, even the leash-free dog parks, 1,000 Acres included, the common denominator is so many people do not pick up after the waste. It is 1,000 Acres is now called Poop Alley because of this, because of the irresponsible dog owners. Sunrise Park and the other parks that we experimented with, it was the same thing. It became a poop park. So I have a problem, and I don't think it's a good city policy to allow this sort of thing unless, number one, they come up with other alternate source of funding for this dog park, non-city money, or have the land donated, have any capital construction costs needed donated. Number two, there needs to be a system and a procedure and rules and regulations about who's going to pick up this dog waste. If it's like, well, we don't know, then we shouldn't have it. We shouldn't have it. The last thing is the most important thing. Troutdale, close to Troutdale, has 2 off-leash dog parks, which are great. You have Lewis and Clark Park, which is just across the bridge from downtown Troutdale. Great leash-free dog park. The other one is Sandy River Delta, also known as 1,000 Acres. Every day you see literally thousands of people use that. Why does Troutdale need a dog park of its own? consider a leash-free dog park of its own, considering there are two great facilities right in our backyard, especially given the fact that every single year we have more and more trouble maintaining the parks that we have. Why do we need to add one more park, which will be problematically the dirtiest park and the most problematic park as far as staff time to clean up? It makes no sense to me now as far as public policy is concerned.
Well, that was one of the reasons why the city council 4 years ago, in the process of parks, froze no more property until we can figure out how we can maintain the property that we already currently have.
Exactly right. It just makes no sense to purchase any more park space until we can figure out how we can maintain how we have. And I think that if I were a betting man, I say the city council will probably talk about voting this dog park back into the budget. And if that's the case, I will go to the city council and I will fight strongly against this. And I encourage you taxpayers to join me when and if they decide to add this dog park, because let's fix our buildings, not spend money on something that we already have, 1,000 acres, Lewis and Clark Park. We don't need another dog park. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, until we get able to maintain what we have, and until there's a policy in place of how it's going to be kept up. If the city council wants to vote it back in on to move forward with it, then please sign up to help maintain it once it's built.
If the city council does approve the dog park, I will be there with a sign-up list for the dates and times that the city council will be going to the dog park. Well, that's it for this episode of Canfield and Company. I want to thank my guest, John Wilson. Thanks for being on the show today, John. Appreciate it.
Hey, let's get back together and talk about the cruise in, the Corbett Fun Fest that's coming up, and also the Sandy Mountain Festival that's coming up.
Sounds good.
Let's get some fun things in here to talk
That's good.
about.
We could do that on the next show, as a matter of fact. Okay, if you have any questions or comments on the show, robert@robertcanfield.com. Previous shows you can see at robertcanfield.com. Thanks for watching Canfield and Company. Have a great Canfield and Company
one last
day.
thing. Glenn, give me a call. Let's come out here and let's debate out these 3 items. Thanks.
Okay, with that, thanks again for watching and have a great Canfield and Company day.